it often feels like walking into a doctor's office is basically like stepping onto another planet.
Oh, absolutely. The white coat, the crinkly paper on the exam table.
Right. You're sitting on that crinkly paper, and the doctor looks at a chart, and suddenly they're just speaking this totally impenetrable alien language.
Yeah, it's a wall of static for most people.
It is, and it's incredibly intimidating. And frankly, it feels almost designed to keep patients in the dark, like a secret club.
It really can feel that way, yeah.
But today, we are handing you the decoder ring. We're taking your stack of notes from that, first-year anatomy textbook, a few fascinating historical papers from 19th century France.
Which is a crazy story, by the way.
Oh, totally wild. And we've also got some modern World Health Organization clinical guidelines. And we're going to take all of that and translate the noise into perfect sense for you.
I love that mission because medical jargon, it does sound like complete nonsense if you don't know the frequency. But once you realize it's actually this highly structured, logical syntax, the intimidation factor just completely vanishes.
You just have to know the rules of the game.
Exactly. You aren't memorizing a dictionary. You're learning the rules of a very old, very elegant programming language.
So our mission for this deep dive is to completely demystify this vocabulary. We're going to put two heavy-hitting, everyday medical words under the microscope.
Gastroenteritis and hepatomegaly.
Yes, those two exactly. And we're attacking this through a really specific structural angle today. Basically, two roots plus a suffix.
It's the classic formula.
Right, so we'll pull these words apart to see the mechanics of how they're built, and then trace their origins to that bizarre chapter of French medical history we mentioned.
Complete with leeches. Lots of leeches.
So many leeches. And then we'll unpack the massive misconceptions surrounding these words in the modern clinic and explore why their definitions are actually actively shifting under our feet right now.
Yeah, the language is struggling to keep up with the science.
Exactly. So by the end of this conversation, you'll be able to spell and decode some of the absolute longest words in a medical chart without a single flashcard.
Which is how it should be taught. Framing medical terminology as just rote memorization is, it's a profound disservice to anyone trying to learn it.
It's just too much to memorize.
Way too much. It's a modular system, right? You're working with these ancient Greek and Latin building blocks that follow, incredibly predictable linguistic rules.
Let's start there with the underlying math of how these words are actually constructed.
Okay, let's do it.
So if you think of this like open source software, the roots of the word are the core programming.
The foundational meaning.
Right. They give you the baseline, like gastar for stomach, enter for intestine, or hepat for liver.
Exactly.
And then you have the suffixes, which are sort of like the user interface patches bolted onto the very end to tell you what's actually happening to that specific organ.
Right, like phthonitis for inflammation or megaly for enlargement.
But the crucial component, the thing that makes it all work, is what sits between them, right?
Yes, the combining vowel. This is the glue. And in the vast majority of cases, it's just the letter O.
Just an O.
Just an O. And its entire function is linguistic euphony, which is really just a fancy way of saying ease of pronunciation for the human mouth.
It just makes it sound smoother.
Exactly. The system is governed by one very strict rule. You keep the combining vowel before a suffix starting with a consonant, and you drop it before a suffix starting with a vowel.
It reminds me of train couplings.
Oh, how so?
Like if you're hooking up train cars, you need those couplings to link them smoothly. But if the next car already has a coupling sticking out, you don't need to jam a second one in there.
That is a perfect analogy. Yes, if the vowel is already there, you don't need another one.
It's just mechanical syntax to make sure the word compiles properly when you say it.
Right, so let's look at a worked example. Let's take the root for liver, which is hepat.
Okay, hepat.
And we want to add the suffix for inflammation, which is abitis. So following the rule, because hepatitis starts with a vowel, an I, we drop the combining O.
Because the suffix already brings its own vowel to the party.
Exactly. So hepat plus itis becomes hepatitis.
Right, because if we didn't drop it, if we kept the O, we'd be stuck saying, wait, let me try it, hepatoitis.
Yeah, hepatoitis.
Hepatoitis, it's so clunky, it just stalls out the tongue completely.
It's terrible euphony. But the rule's elegance really shines when we look at our second word, hepatomegaly.
Okay, let's break that one down.
So we take the exact same liver root, hepat, but this time we swap in the suffix megaly, which means enlargement.
And megaly starts with an M, a consonant.
Bingo. Because it begins with a consonant, keeping the combining vowel is totally mandatory so we can actually say it. So hepat plus O plus megaly forms hepatomegaly.
Hepatomegaly. So the root stays static, but the syntax adjusts purely based on the very next letter.
Exactly. It's completely predictable.
That basic rule is super satisfying. But, I mean, the twist is where the system really flexes its muscles, right? The math changes when you have more than one root.
Yes, the root-to-root exception. This is the clause that trips up nearly every single beginner in medical terminology.
Because the rule flips.
It does. Between two moots, you always keep the combining vowel, regardless of what letter comes next. Even if the next root starts with a vowel, the O stays.
Which brings us to the star of the show for today, gastroenteritis.
It's the ultimate test case.
Right. So building this word from scratch is just a brilliant demonstration of this code in action. We start with the two roots, right? Gastro for stomach and enter for intestine.
Correct.
Now, under the basic suffix rule we just talked about, because enter starts with an E, a vowel you'd expect to drop the O and get gastroenteritis.
But that sounds wrong, doesn't it?
It totally sounds wrong. Gastroenteritis.
Yeah.
Because they're both core roots, the combining vowel locks into place permanently between them.
Exactly. They are equal partners, so they get the O as a bridge. We get gastroenter.
Right. And then, moving to the final stage of the word, we apply the normal basic suffix rule at the very end.
Because now we are dealing with a root meeting a suffix, not a root meeting another root.
Exactly. So we add itis. And because itis starts with a vowel, we drop the final combining vowel to avoid that weird vowel-on-vowel collision.
Leaving us with gastroenteritis.
It's such a brilliant construction when you actually look at it. One single word containing two completely different applications of the rule, flawlessly doing what it needs to do.
It is engineered for perfection. And once you understand that root-to-root exception, these massive, terrifying-looking words in a medical chart just unfold for you.
Like, give me an example of a really terrifying one.
Okay, take a word like hepatosplenomegaly.
Oof. Hepatomegaly. That's a mouthful.
It is. It means the liver and the spleen are enlarged simultaneously. You see it in conditions like severe mononucleosis or certain types of leukemias.
Okay, so liver is papat, spleen is splen, enlargement is megaly.
Right. So following the syntax, we keep the vowel between the two roots.
Because root to root always keeps the O.
Exactly, giving us hepatosplen. And then we keep the vowel before the consonant suffix megaly.
Giving us hepatosplenomegaly.
Right. It is one of the most intimidating words a first-year medical student ever encounters, yet every single component is doing highly predictable, strictly governed work.
And it even stands over into adjectives, right?
It does, yeah.
Like the word gastroduodenal, meaning something that spans the stomach and the duodenum like a peptic ulcer.
Perfect example.
So root to root, the O stays. Gastroduoden. And then adding the adjective suffix allow, which starts with an A, we drop the vowel. Gastroduodenal.
The spelling is just engineered to absolute mathematical perfection.
It really is.
Yeah.
Which honestly makes the reality of how these words are actually used in the modern clinic quite jarring.
It's a bit of a mess, frankly.
Yeah, this disconnect between the strict Greek roots and the modern clinical application is fascinating to me. Because the word parts give you this stable, locked-in anatomical meaning. Right.
Literal translations.
So gastroenteritis literally translates to inflammation of the tissue of the stomach and the small intestine.
Literally, yes.
Yet, doctors use it as this blanket term for almost any bout of infectious diarrhea. I mean, even if the stomach lining isn't technically inflamed at all.
Exactly.
We have this hyper-precise language being used with such surprising looseness. Why is that?
Well, the clinical definition of gastroenteritis is a moving target because it describes a syndrome, not a strict anatomical reality.
A syndrome, so it's a collection of symptoms?
Exactly. The World Health Organization and the CDC, they define it functionally. They aren't looking at tissue under a microscope. They're looking for 3 or more loose stools in a 24-hour period, often accompanied by vomiting and abdominal cramping.
And usually resolving in a week or two.
Right, so the diagnosis is clinical, it's not pathological.
Meaning a doctor isn't ordering a biopsy of your gut tissue during a standard, 3-day diarrheal illness just to check if the cellular inflammation matches the ancient Greek etymology.
That would be absurd, right? And totally invasive for no reason. So they use this highly precise word as a sort of catch-all bucket for a symptom pattern.
Which is practical, but linguistically a little sloppy.
Very sloppy. And this gap between strict translation and clinical reality gets even more complicated when we move from symptom-based syndromes like diarrhea to physical signs.
Like hepatomegaly.
Right. The root translates purely to an enlarged liver, but the clinical application demands context. Enlarged compared to what?
Right, because a 6'5" athlete and a 5-foot-tall accountant are obviously going to have vastly different baseline organ volumes.
You'd think that's obvious, but historically, medicine actually ignored that nuance. Hepatomegaly used to be taught as a fixed measurement on a ruler.
Wait, really? A literal ruler?
Basically, yeah. The classic physical exam involved percussing, which is like tapping the abdomen to estimate the span of the liver, and if it measured greater than 12 or 13 centimeters, boom, the patient was diagnosed with hepatomegaly.
Regardless of how big the person was?
Regardless. But modern medicine recognizes that as a deeply flawed metric, right? Liver size naturally scales with patients' height, their sex, and their overall body habitus.
Okay, so the definition has essentially drifted from this fixed anatomical number to more of a statistical distribution.
Precisely. Hepatomegaly today means a liver size that falls outside a population-adjusted normal range.
But this begs a massive question for me. If our clinical definitions are based on these shifting functional syndromes and statistical curves, why on earth are we still anchored to this rigid, ancient Greek naming system?
Right, why not just invent new words?
Yeah. To understand that, we have to look at the historical papers from the source material we're diving into today, because this standardized suffix system, it wasn't handed down by Hippocrates on Mount Olympus.
No, it definitely wasn't. Ancient Greek and Roman physicians used roots like gaster and heper purely descriptively. They weren't building Lego words.
So when did that start? The modern modular system, like explicitly bolting on ileitis to denote a specific inflammatory disease state that was engineered much later, primarily in early 19th century France.
Ah, yes. The story of Francois-Joseph Victor Broussais.
A fascinating guy and a terrifying doctor.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Looking at him in the 1810s and 1820s, it's this wild cautionary tale about medical dogma.
He built this entire immensely powerful school of thought called physiological medicine.
And it rested on one central kind of insane theory, right? That nearly all systemic diseases, especially fevers, originated from irritation of the gastrointestinal tract.
Everything was gut inflammation to him.
Yeah.
Everything. He popularized the heir to suffix with a vengeance. He diagnosed gastritis and gastroenteritis at a staggering rate, making those terms totally ubiquitous across Europe.
He firmly believed the inflamed gut was the root of all physiological evil.
And his treatment.
His primary therapeutic intervention for all this theoretical gut inflammation was to apply leeches directly to the patient's abdomen.
Lots of leeches.
Yeah, to draw the blood away from the gut. And he was so influential that leech imports into France spiked into the millions during his reign.
It was a complete medical fad masquerading as foundational science.
So how did it end? Did people just realize it wasn't working?
The collapse of Broussais' empire happened in the 1830s, and it was driven by the rise of clinicopathological correlation.
Which means?
Clinicians began rigorously checking his clinical diagnoses against what they actually found during post-mortem autopsies.
Oh, wow. So they'd look at the actual tissue after the patient died.
Exactly, and they quickly discovered that his ichitis diagnoses rarely corresponded to any observable tissue inflammation in the gut.
The theory was a total fabrication.
Completely. But here's the ultimate irony. While his leech therapy and his physiological theories were totally discredited, his vocabulary patch actually survived.
That is wild. The Ichitis Convention just became the permanent nomenclature for Western medicine.
Appendicitis, arthritis, dermatitis, they all owe their naming structure to a physician who was pathologically obsessed with imaginary stomach inflammation.
It's a linguistic ghost.
Yeah.
But, contrast that with the megaly suffix, which actually had a much more scientifically rigorous origin.
Yeah, megaly had a much quieter, more respectable birth. It emerged in mid to late 19th century pathology with figures like Rudolf Virchow.
The cellular pathology guy.
Exactly. Virchow insisted that disease must be understood objectively at the cellular and tissue level, rather than through these vague systemic theories like Broussais had.
Right, so cardiomegaly and hepatomegaly were cataloged as observable, measurable physical signs. It anchored the vocabulary in undeniable anatomical reality.
You say the liver is enlarged, you can literally weigh it and measure it and prove it.
Right. But that historical phenomenon where a clinical label detaches from the actual biological reality, I mean, that is still happening today with these exact same words.
Oh, all the time.
The source material highlights several massive modern misconceptions. Let's start with the term that I guarantee almost everyone listening to this has used at some point, the stomach flu.
Oh, yes. It is the default phrase for patients, and it is biologically and epidemiologically entirely incorrect.
Totally wrong.
Viral gastroenteritis is overwhelmingly caused by pathogens like norovirus or rotavirus.
Right.
But the influenza virus is a distinct respiratory pathogen. True influenza essentially never causes the predominant vomiting and diarrhea profile that the public associates with the stomach flu.
So public health officials have actually been trying to retire this phrase for decades because it creates dangerous confusion.
Right, because it makes people think their seasonal flu shot will protect them from a gastrointestinal virus.
Which it absolutely won't.
Not at all.
And worse, I think calling it a flu drastically undersells the contagion level. Like, norovirus is a beast. It can survive on surfaces for weeks and spreads like wildfire in closed environments like cruise ships or schools.
It's incredibly robust. And that leads to the second major trap, which is the assumption that gastroenteritis is just synonymous with food poisoning.
Right, like you just ate some bad takeout.
Yeah, while ingesting contaminated food is a primary vector, it is far from the only one.
These pathogens spread aggressively through person-to-person contact, contaminated water supplies, or even, strangely enough, secondary to antibiotic use.
Yeah, that's a huge one. Broad-spectrum antibiotics can wipe out the protective flora in your gut, and that allows opportunistic bacteria to move in and trigger severe enterocolitis.
It's not just a bad burrito. Now, shifting to the clinical traps surrounding hepatomegaly, the physical exam itself presents a massive diagnostic illusion, doesn't it?
It really does. It's notoriously tricky.
Because if the exam is just a doctor feeling for the edge of the liver below your rib cage, aren't there a dozen anatomical reasons the liver might just be sitting lower in the abdomen without actually being enlarged?
Absolutely. And it is a classic trap for medical students. A palpable liver edge is frequently just a normal-sized liver that's been displaced downwards.
By what?
Well, in a patient with advanced COPD, for instance, the lungs become hyperinflated. They trap air.
Oh, so they take up more room.
Right. Those massive hyperinflated lungs push the diaphragm down, which in turn shoves the liver below the costal margin, the rib cage.
So you feel the edge, but the volume of the organ is completely normal.
Exactly. You're feeling displacement, not enlargement.
Or what about structural variations, like a Riedel's lobe?
Yes. A Riedel's lobe is a harmless, tongue-like extension of the right lobe of the liver.
And it feels identical to hepatomegaly on a physical exam.
Identical. But it carries absolutely zero pathology. It's just a quirk of how that person's liver grew.
So this unreliability is exactly why modern hepatology relies so heavily on high-resolution imaging now.
Right. You need an ultrasound or a CT scan to confirm true volumetric hepatomegaly. You have to actually see the whole organ, not just feel the edge.
And even when imaging confirms it, we hit the final trap, right? Hepatomegaly is not a disease.
No, it is a physical sign.
It's an alarm bell.
Exactly. It's an alarm bell that demands you investigate the underlying cause. Is it viral hepatitis? Is right-sided heart failure causing blood to back up and congest the hepatic veins?
So the word is the beginning of the diagnostic journey, never the end.
Beautifully said.
To really master this system, you need to see how these root components allow you to navigate the broader medical landscape. If you understand the code we talked about, you can build out a whole neighborhood of words.
You're just swapping out variables.
Right. So if gastroenteritis is the stomach and intestines, we can isolate the variables. Just the stomach is gastritis, which is often linked to an H. pylori bacterial infection, or maybe overuse of NSAIDs like ibuprofen.
And if the inflammation is isolated to the small intestine, you just have enteritis.
And the large intestine is colitis.
Right. And if both are involved, the roots combine seamlessly into enterocolitis.
The suffixes transfer cleanly across the entire anatomy too. Splenomegaly for the spleen, cardiomegaly for the heart.
You're just swapping out the core programming language while the user interface patch the suffix remains identical.
It's so cool. And understanding these terms is really critical because they describe some of the heaviest health burdens on the planet today.
They do. Let's look at gastroenteritis again. It isn't just a weekend inconvenience. Diarrheal disease remains a leading cause of mortality in children under 5 globally.
Especially in regions lacking robust sanitation infrastructure.
We are talking about hundreds of thousands of preventable deaths annually, mostly due to profound dehydration.
But the World Health Organization sources detail the solution to this, and it is astonishingly low-tech.
It really is. Oral rehydration therapy, or ORT.
Public health historians consistently rank ORT among the greatest medical advances of the entire 20th century.
It's basically a miracle.
But the fascinating part to me is the physiological mechanism behind it. Like, why can't you just give a severely dehydrated child a glass of plain water?
Because the standard osmotic gradients in the gut are completely disrupted by the infection.
The pathogens cause chaos.
Right. The pathogens causing gastroenteritis essentially paralyze the standard sodium transporters in the intestinal wall.
So if you drink plain water, it isn't absorbed.
No, it passes straight through, often worsening the diarrhea.
But the breakthrough came in the 1960s with cholera research. They discovered a secondary backdoor in the gut lining.
The sodium-glucose cotransporter, specifically SGLT1.
This mechanism is like the molecular syringe that makes ORT work, right?
It is. The cotransporter requires a highly specific biochemical key to activate. It only works if one molecule of sodium and one molecule of glucose arrive at the gate at the exact same time.
So salt and sugar together.
Yes. When they arrive simultaneously, the transporter forces them both across the intestinal wall into the bloodstream.
And because of the rules of osmosis, water passively follows that salt and sugar right across the barrier, rapidly rehydrating the patient.
It's brilliant. That precise ratio of water, salt, and sugar bypasses the inflammatory damage of gastroenteritis entirely, saving millions of lives for literally pennies a dose.
It's incredible. So while gastroenteritis highlights a triumph in global infectious disease, our second word, hepatomegaly, points directly to a rapidly escalating modern epidemic.
A huge one, yes.
Because the most common reason a primary care doctor orders liver imaging today isn't to look for infectious hepatitis anymore.
No, it's to look for fatty liver disease.
Right. The terminology has recently been updated to metabolic dysfunction-associated steatotic liver disease, or MASLD.
Which is inextricably linked to the global rise in obesity and type 2 diabetes.
And the hepatomegaly in this case is caused by lipids physically accumulating inside the liver cells, the hepatocytes.
Right, the organ physically swells up with fat.
So an enlarged fatty liver on a routine ultrasound is basically an early warning system. It's the physical manifestation of metabolic overload, appearing long before the tissue begins to permanently scar and degrade into cirrhosis.
It is a perfect example of why hepatomegaly is such a vital clinical sign today. Identifying that anatomical enlargement gives the clinician a critical window.
A window to do what?
To intervene with lifestyle changes or metabolic therapies before irreversible damage occurs.
Wow, look at the sheer amount of ground we've covered by decoding just 2 words.
There's a lot.
You now understand the linguistic mechanics of the combining vowel, how the O ensures euphony, dropping before vowel suffixes but locking tight between core roots.
You've navigated the bizarre history of Broussais' leech therapy.
Oh man, the leeches. You've debunked the pervasive myth of the stomach flu, explored the molecular brilliance of the sodium-glucose cotransporter in ORT, and seen how hepatomegaly acts as a crucial alarm bell for modern metabolic disease.
It really proves that vocabulary is never just a list of terms. It is a map of how we understand human biology, history, and pathology.
Absolutely. But I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over, one that builds on everything we've unpacked today about how slippery these definitions have become.
This is the real challenge moving forward.
Right, because we are currently using a rigid 19th century naming system built from ancient Greek to label modern illnesses that we often define quite loosely in the clinic. And up until now, human doctors have been able to handle that semantic ambiguity.
Humans are good at context. Machines aren't.
Exactly. The future of diagnostics relies heavily on artificial intelligence and natural language processing. We are training massive diagnostic AI models by feeding them millions of electronic health records.
And those NLP models rely on strict, logical, semantic relationships.
So if human doctors continuously use a word like gastroenteritis, which strictly linguistically means tissue inflammation, to document a functional, non-inflammatory diarrheal syndrome, they are injecting corrupted semantic data into the machine learning models.
Right, they're teaching the AI the wrong translation.
We are building the medicine of the 21st century on the back of an AI infrastructure that might profoundly struggle to understand the nuances of a 19th century vocabulary patch.
Will the AI realize that the doctor's diagnosis doesn't match the strict Greek anatomy? Or will the ancient language eventually break the algorithms of the future?
The linguistic debt of medical history is eventually going to come due.
It's a fascinating, slightly terrifying problem.
It really is. For now, though, you hold the decoder ring. Thank you for joining this deep dive. Keep pushing back on the jargon, look for the roots, and keep decoding the world around you.